lifestyle. There's a contrast in lifestyle. Your generation, as they call it, the hip-hop generation, opposed to the traditional generation that brought me up and raised them. What are the differences? How come our generation seems to have so much trouble dealing with your generation? And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we actually just won't sit down and talk to you. We need to start building bridges with you to have the dialogue that we need. You know, they act like cultural revolution is a new thing, that all of a sudden we looked up and you kids had pants falling off you and your hats turned around backwards, and like that's something that needs to be demonized and made bad of. Like rap music is something that needs to be demonized. What I discovered after I thought about it and went to look into research and so forth is that all youth groups have developed their own culture. Ours, believe it or not, was based on black pride and the civil rights movement. It dictated basically the way we came up. Rock and roll was a part of our culture. In fact, when rock and roll first came out, they demonized rock and roll. Our parents wouldn't even let us look at Elvis Presley on the television because they said you was going to die and go to hell if you looked at Elvis Presley on television. Yeah, I said, well, they was up in arms about that. And any kind of music that related to rock and roll, they didn't want us to have anything to do with it. Well, now we have an entire generation of kids who are involved in what we call hip-hop culture. And it's a lifestyle, believe it or not, that goes with that culture. When we're talking about the hip-hop generation, we are basically talking about people that were born between 1965 through 1985, right? Which means that now, here you are, 17, 18, 19, coming of age. There's a difference, too, in your culture that a lot of people don't realize. The people that were born in the early part of the culture, the LL Cools, Queen Latifahs, and so forth, that were part of the early part of the culture, think a little differently than the kids that were born at the later part of the hip-hop culture. As evidenced by now, Biggie, Tupac. See, they think completely different than the crew thought that first started, first brought it to fruition. In fact, a lot of kids don't really realize it was Quincy Jones, who's a guy my age and older in company, who actually created the stage for hip-hop in the world. He was the one that first heard it, valued it, and said that there needed to be a place for it in our culture. And from him promoting it and pushing it, it took off. It took on a life of its own. When we talk about your culture, there's some difference between your culture and our culture as we knew it. What influences your culture? Well, basically, your core beliefs are influenced by your peers, all right? Why so much with your peers? Why are your buddies and your dogs and your roomies and your homies so important to you? Because you spend more time with one another than ever before. When he and I were coming up, we didn't get to spend as much time in a day as you get to spend with one another, simply because the family structure was intact and it was set up completely different. We had to go home and check in at the home site. In fact, in my house, everybody was there at 5 o'clock. Nobody missed 5 o'clock dinner. You didn't have that kind of latitude. Everybody had to be at the table because there was only one meal cooked, and Ruth Boone was not messing around about that one meal. You had to be there. Not only did you have to be there to eat, you had to be there to check in, to let her know what happened during the day, get your evening chores straight, your homework assignments. All that stuff was taken care of literally between 5 and 7. And then you could move back outside and do what you need to do. But nobody escaped coming in there at 5 o'clock. She didn't play that at all. Well, the nuclear family, as we know it, disintegrated. Not that your parents are bad. It's just that in most households right now, it takes both parents to try to make a living in order to keep the family going. So a lot of times when you kids came home, there was nobody in there, am I right? You was literally kind of left to your own devices in the house to make a move, to make your own decision. So therefore you kind of moved outside and just started hanging with one another. And your peers became so very important to you. What else is different? The global images. When I was first born, you know what? And that television didn't come about till 1951, 52. I can remember when we got our first television set. It's literally been a part of your life since you've been coming up. You've seen global images from around the world. You've got those pictures locked away in your world view, the way you view the world. Why? Because technology and just cultural evolution has lent that to you. That's a normal part of your life. What goes on with global images, they kind of dictate your values and your system for you, because you make your decisions kind of based off of what you see. Whereas when we were coming up, most of our values in our world picture, our global picture, was passed on to us by word of mouth, from our parents to our grandparents. Why? Because those mediums weren't available then. I get to laughing now. You know, we think about things like layaway. If I was to mention a layaway, most kids would have got no idea what a layaway is. In fact, you think somebody's getting ready for a funeral when I mention layaway to you. Layaway was actually a viable part of adolescent development because we couldn't afford everything, so you had to make payments on it in order to be able to get it out. But nowadays, you know what? Kids don't really kind of get to layaway. Instant gratification, they think about payoffs immediately. My daughter would have no idea what layaway was all about. Make no mistake about it. Products. You kids may not realize this, but y'all are big business. Do you know that? Do you realize that? Corporate America has found out y'all big business. Products influence your life more than ever before. Nike shoes, the gold chains, all of those things, Tommy Hilfiger, all of those things that you wear. In fact, how about this? Hip-hop culture has even developed its own clothes, its own style. Do you realize that? Yeah, your own appearance. And that, believe it or not, corporate America picked up on that 10 years ago. That's why they do what they do. Look at the flavor of commercials now regarding Pepsi, Coke. What kind of flavor do they have to them? Anybody picked up on it? Huh? Rap music. What else? McDonald's? Basketball players. You want to know why? Because they know that you have been commercialized to no end. That a lot of your life is based around material things and being able to acquire those material things. That don't make it bad. That just says that, that's okay to want those things. Yeah, that don't make it bad. See, a lot of people say, well, that makes them bad because they just got their life centered on material things. Well, you know what? We've spoon-fed you that since the day that you came out of the womb. You've seen it every single way you go. When you turn that television on, that American dream was shoved down your throat. Am I right? In the sitcoms that you saw, Bill Cosby, all those things that you saw, it literally was shoved down your throat. And you did a good job of assimilating that. An extremely good job of assimilating that. You want the American dream. Well, let's take a look at our generation. What set up our core beliefs? Well, believe it or not, traditionally what set them up? One was the family. Well, there you out the box again, because basically the family kind of fragmented itself, am I right? All right? So if I value family and yours wasn't there, and that doesn't say they were bad because they wasn't there, when you and I talk to one another, obviously we have a different what regarding family? A different meaning, am I right? A different interpretation. We got different thoughts, different feelings about it. See, I think family one way, you think family another way. What else was traditionally different with us? Well, what dictated our value was the church. How many of you in here have been in the church recently, the last 2 or 3 years? Anybody? All right? But basically, the youth culture per se is not really in line with spirituality the way we were. See, it was a big part of our life. We kind of got marched into church when I was a kid, whether we wanted to go or not. Well, spirituality has kind of changed. Today's generation don't quite rock with it the way we rock with it. A lot of that is because of the global images that you've seen. You've seen Catholics killing Protestants, Muslims killing Jews. You just see all of that, and you know what you tell yourself? That the whole thing is a farce. They actually don't believe in themselves, because look at the way they act. And what happens is it doesn't reinforce itself with you. You don't really validate that particular aspect. What else is different? School. School was a big part of our life. We knew that the only way to get ahead, make no mistake about it, was to be able to try to do it educationally. Well, let's look at the state of affairs regarding our schools, regarding you kids right now. Most urban schools are what? Falling down to the ground, am I right? What about the books and so forth that they have in them? What kind of books do they have in them? Old, outdated, am I right?
Not enough.
Not enough of them. In fact, classrooms are cold, no ventilation. It just goes on and on. Plus, we got rape, murder, incest, suicide, all those things you got to be on guard for. There's more metal detectors now in schools than they got at airports. Am I right? And it's very difficult to try to learn in that kind of environment. So the school core value placed for you kids and the priority that it has in your life is not the same place that it has in our life.